So we have a set of agreements. These have also evolved over time. We use this internally with our team. We try and put this out there when we have small and large gatherings. But they're really reminders to us about how it is that we can be in space and in discussion with each other. So I'm not going to read them all verbatim, but I'm going to kind of hit the highlights on them. So we have some commitments that we have created that we refer to as leading with love. And that is the curiosity, courage, connection, care, and compassion. So we're asking you to think about those things as you're having your small table and later on today some larger conversations. To try and reflect on things and not just react to things that you hear. Embrace the complexity, and I think Teresa mentioned that. Like we have a lot of truths that kind of carry with us. I carry multiple truths inside of my own being. And to just recognize that sometimes things play out differently, and sometimes they play out differently because we have differential power in the room. Being vulnerable, leaning into discomfort, kind of practicing our own emotional intelligence and empathy. Listen because you want to listen. Not because you're trying to figure out how I should respond to something, but just actually listen and let some of those things permeate. Speak for yourself, so not for others, but to use that first person language. This next one is really important to us, and it's like if you hear a story throughout today, that it's not your story to take and tell in another setting. People actually own their own stories, so just whatever is shared here, it stays here, and that's really important. We're going to try and find ways for everybody to participate, but we don't all participate in the same way. And some folks feel really comfortable kind of shouting out in a room. Others might want to write something on a Post-it, or they might want to send something later on. We're going to try and figure out a way that everybody gets to participate in a way that is comfortable for them. And in that, there's going to be lots of opportunities to share, not only today, but we're embarking on what could be a 5, 7, 10-year journey here. So there'll be lots of things that happen, but we are in one room. And we're going to be doing some small breakouts. Later today, we're going to be doing some large breakouts where there'll be like 20-ish people in a breakout. And so trying to have one conversation at a time so that we don't lose kind of the essence of what you're adding to the conversation. We'll have scribes and note takers and all kinds of things, but as much as we can practice the listening for who's speaking and not try and speak and have sidebar conversations, that will help us today. So I'm going to do the how we got here part of this. We have, for the last couple of convenings, and I think if you all were tracking your emails, this is our 15th convening. And so we're going to have partner spotlights at a couple of times during the day. We'll have some movement, kind of somatic things going on. But most of the day is really centered around us asking some questions and you all leaning in and helping us shape what this future state could look like. And then we'll end the day with kind of some ideas about what happens next. And then when we're done, which we're hoping will be around 4 o'clock, from 4 until 6, we're going to have more food and beverage and just allow you all to have some networking. And we're calling it a mixer, but it's really just, the thing that I hate the most is making you all be quiet so somebody with a microphone can speak. We just want to have enough time that you all can actually speak with each other. That's important. So, how we got here, and I don't know why animations always throw me. Seriously, it's like whoa. But in 2014, a group of 37 community leaders came together from all 5 counties, the 8 tribes across these 5 counties, to create something called the North Sound Accountable Community of Health. This is before there was any Medicaid waiver, before there was even any notion that there would be funds that would come to this structure. And the original mission vision was around population health, community health. What does it look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Well, we're now 11 years from when they created that vision and mission statement. And in 2020, our board actually released us from the vision and mission statements, and they created this statement that you see on the screen. They created a purpose statement because the question that was constantly asked of me, So what's the reason that North Sound ACH exists? If there's no federal money, if there's no waiver, if there's no Medicaid money, should we close our doors? What's our reason to continue to operate as an ACH? And so this is what they came up with, that we exist to create a just and inclusive culture and the necessary conditions for all community members to thrive. Now, you could call that our mission or vision or whatever, but that statement drives every internal decision that we make. We always are coming back to this. Is it actually going to get us to this future state that the board was envisioning? So we're one of 9 ACHs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on like the history of the ACHs, but we're one of 9. There was a moment in time in 2015 where Snohomish County was going to be part of the King County ACH. If that had occurred, North Sound ACH would have had 4 counties and we'd probably be the smallest of the 9 ACHs. By having Snohomish County be part of North Sound, we are the 2nd largest ACH next to King County in terms of population. So we have some ability to influence what's happening across the state. And the 9 ACHs about 1.5 years ago formed a coalition. So we have a separate freestanding entity that is the coalition of the ACHs to try and not only do the work locally and regionally, but to also influence what's happening at the state and federal level. North Sound, 1.2 million people. We have 2 counties that are in the water. Like when we talk about the waterways and the importance of that, it creates a very different type of rural and remote access. And that's not even talking about that blue dot way at the top, which is Point Roberts, where in order to get to Point Roberts, you have to travel through Canada from Whatcom County to get to Point Roberts. That's isolation in a very different way than many of us are used to. But having the 8 tribes in the North Sound region, 8 of the 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington are here with their traditional homelands in this region, be partners with the ACH has been profound from day one. And so when we think about what exactly it is that our region is encompassing, it is these 5 counties and our relationships with the 8 tribes. Our strategic direction has been evolving over the last 10 years. We started with a commitment around targeted universalism, and if you don't know what that is, feel free to find me and I'll tell you about it in a corner. It's a lot of letters and some harsh words, but at its heart, it's that every community is situated differently. And so we can have a global goal, but in order to meet the needs of our community, we need to have targeted strategies for every community. We do not come with one global strategy and say that'll work for everybody. In order for everybody to meet that goal, we need to have specific strategies for them. Belonging, equity, honoring tribal sovereignty, which in the scheme of like chaotic things that are happening, the federal government is trying to attack tribal sovereignty. So that's also kind of one of the other kind of, stop using curse words, but we adopted the vital conditions for well-being in 2020. And then about 2.5 years ago, we adopted some principles around leading with love. These things guide all of the work that we do. It is guiding our strategic planning process that the board has us engaging in. And it's important for us to think through what do each of these things mean to us. So in 2022, we launched the Collaborative Action Network. And we had just finished a 5-year Medicaid waiver. North Sound kind of, I don't know if it's me or if it's just the team that we've brought on board, we kind of like to beta test a lot of things. And so we had had 5 years of some pretty deep Medicaid transformation work that was fairly prescriptive. The first waiver was focused around 8 project areas. And each of the 9 ACHs got to decide whether they were going to do 4, 6, or 8 of the projects. And our criteria were that we were going to do the projects if we thought that we had partners who were interested in the work, and we thought they had the capacity to do it. And so the North Sound region became the only one of the 9 ACHs that took on all 8 project areas. The other regions said, yeah, maybe we can do 4, maybe we can do 6. Nobody else was willing to do 8, but our partners were. So we just said, we're going to do that, and we're going to see what happens. And what ended up happening for our region is that we earned more money during the waiver than our board and our finance team had anticipated that we would earn. And that money for us is all going out to everything that we do in sharing dollars with our partner organizations. At the end of the waiver, when we launched the network, we had 43 organizations that joined the Collaborative Action Network. And at the end of 2024, we had 243 organizations in the Collaborative Action Network. And that is still growing. It has been an amazing journey to realize that there are partners who actually want to come together, not just to work with us, because in some ways we're I think I've called us like the soil amender on the farm. We are not the seeds, we are not the trees, we're not harvesting the fruit, you all are. This is about the work that you do, and we're trying to figure out how can we be of value to help support and build the capacity for the work that you do. So this network has become incredibly an important strategy for us. We're trying to figure out how can we help you, not how can we help the ACH. But when our board came together, they obviously could not have envisioned COVID, which the first case of COVID in the country happened at Providence Hospital in Everett about 2 weeks before a January convening that year. And Nicole and I reminisce about the fact that we had partners who said, what are you going to do to not have a spread of infection? And at the time, what did we know? And we said, we're going to have hand sanitizer at every table and we'll have masks. We just didn't know what else we were supposed to do. But at the time, we also closed our office on March 13th of 2020. And from our perspective, who could have imagined that 5.5 years later, we have still not gone back to an office? So we closed our office doors in 2020 and have been remote since then. We also couldn't have imagined a greater than 100-year flood that displaced so many families in Whatcom and Skagit counties. We could not have imagined the demand, the global social justice, racial justice reckoning that occurred in 2020, and how that would actually take an organization that was focused on health and population health and community health and have us look to our partners to try and figure out where is our space? What's our role in this? And so the pictures are really just, they're reminders for me that we were trying to do convenings and building these relationships while we were also delivering masks. We became a PPE distribution site. Again, remember, we didn't have an office. So we got asked by the Department of the Military, could you all use some masks? And Nicole says, well, we have 1.2 million people, let's ask them for 2.5 million masks. And they said yes. We would not have been able to do our role with the mass distribution without the Port of Skagit. They stepped in and said, you can use our storage facilities. Really pretty incredible. And all of a sudden, we had to figure out not only how do you track masks, but how do you create a distribution plan when that's not our skill set? Yet we did. But North Sound ACH did not deliver one mask. You all did. So it was how do we actually work with this network to get masks and face shields and gowns, like 1,000 things. And it was all focused on COVID. But then what happens, and this is kind of the truck story, is that summer we also have one of the worst wildfire seasons. And so we're now being asked, can you deliver some of those masks to Winthrop and TWISP and Index? Because folks don't have any PPE where they're in the thickest and the densest of smoke. And so we've started, again, having these partnerships where we were sharing what resources we had with as many communities as we could. And sometimes it was just, taking a truck, dropping things off. We were dropping boxes of masks through windows to fire and EMS stations. How do we actually create this network, but also support the network with whatever it is that's coming your way? We then have, and some of you here in the room were involved with this, had the periods of time when there were folks escaping Afghanistan and arriving in the North Sound region, and then folks who were coming to the North Sound region from Ukraine. And then we had asylum-seeking families who were showing up at the southern US border, being bused to Boston or Chicago. Families were finding their way across Canada, dropping back into the United States at the Peace Arch border in Bellingham. They were on 2,000-mile journeys and showing up here in the North Sound region. And we were having to figure out, like, again, what's our role with this? But our partners became the folks that we turned to try and figure that out. Our board could not have envisioned that kind of a role for the ACH back in 2014. So some of our convenings have been done fully masked. Really challenging to follow all of those communication guidelines. Like at my hearing, because like I'm old, it's hard for me sometimes to hear the specifics of what someone is saying when they're masked. I follow facial features and I can see voices differently, yet we did it. We were able to kind of communicate through all of those things. When I reflect on the land and the place where we are, our last convening was astounding for the number of you that brought young people with you when you had an opportunity to talk about the work that you did. So the reminder that the ACH is here not only for us, but for the next generation and the generation after that. That's a piece of the work that we're doing, a diverse community, but also people of every age as they're moving through this work. We have folks who've come together to talk about things. This was an outside conversation at the Swinomish Casino of folks who wanted to talk about what does reentry look like? What does that even mean to be talking about people who are moving from jail and prison back into community? And it, again, was stunning to have some high school students who wanted to be a part of this conversation, and they're talking about high school students, their colleagues, their family members, and how can they be better support to high school students who are struggling with these issues. Really amazing conversations that occur if we can create the space to do that. We've used poetry, the arts, film. We've got a couple of folks here that were part of some of the films that were produced, who were some of the filmmakers who produced those films. And out of these, we would spend time where some of these exercises would lift up pain, trauma, past experiences, but also hope, imagination, creativity, people walking away with things that they couldn't have even imagined that they could create based on their own life experiences and their own stories. Language access probably became an issue for us right after the first COVID case, when we were asked, can you help set up some COVID testing sites, COVID vaccine sites? And we said, we could, but using targeted universalism, how can we make sure that there's somebody available to act as a bit of an ambassador going through those sites, who actually, language and culturally specific, can help people in our community meander through something that was foreign to folks who were monolingual and smart and experienced in the healthcare system. But imagine that you're not, and you're trying to understand why aren't people from the Punjabi community coming in and getting their masks and their test kits, because they don't have a clue like what's going on here. And so we started this kind of focus on language access. It led us to some really amazing relationships with different interpreter programs. And we've tried to have interpreters available for any individual who registers for the conference. And as you saw earlier, at table 14, we have an interpreter available for folks. And that's our commitment. We're going to keep doing that. But I'm going to say we're on the beginning end of a learning journey about how to do language access well. So we're going to stumble. Sometimes we're not going to do it incredibly perfectly. But each convening and each meeting, we're hoping to get better at it. We also have leadership changes. And even though I don't think that Kevin is here, you're seeing a picture of our current board chair for 2025. The notion that we can actually have someone who doesn't necessarily see themselves as the typical member of our board, doesn't see themselves as a board chair for a large nonprofit organization, stepping into that role and doing amazingly well because we are aligned in terms of vision, mission, values. So when we talk about the board wanting to change its composition, Kevin to me is a perfect example. Our board chair would self-describe himself as formerly incarcerated, struggled with addiction, behavioral health issues, has moved his organization, his congregation, to being in a place where they support people in their community who are going through those same challenges. He's now the chair of our board of directors, and just been amazing. And I love the fact that I'm standing behind Kevin, because as you all know, I'm on a transition for setting the stage for the new CEO that will be coming in. So as we think about the rest of today, there's just a couple more comments, and then I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Matt. When I said that we closed our office in March of 2020, and we couldn't have imagined that we'd be 5 years in this space that we're in, we have an opportunity. And the opportunity that we have is to try and find a new office space. We've watched all of the return to work efforts. Many of you are back in your offices. Well, we don't have an office to return to. In 2020, the majority of our team lived in the city of Bellingham. Today, our team ranges from Federal Way to Sumas. I don't even know where we would put an office if we wanted to have a physical space to return to. But because of the conversations that you all have had with us over the last 15 convenings, we actually said, I wonder what would happen if instead of us looking for an office, we're actually looking to create a space that we could collectively use, collectively share. And it began to take on a little bit of a nomenclature that has been called the community campus idea. But what I'm going to ask of you, because words make a difference, is that if you ever talk about the campus, that you please do it with a lowercase c. It doesn't have a name yet. We don't know if we're talking about one space or 7 spaces. We don't know if we're talking about something small or something huge. We don't know if we're talking about something that's just like a room like this or 5 stories with low-income housing above the, we have no idea what that space would look like. It's easy to go out and find a leasing agent to try and find us a new office space. That's easy. What's harder is to try and imagine what's the space that would be of value to you. And so a lot of today is using your individual and collective imaginations to tell us what would be important when we're thinking about space. Because this is, again, like a 5-7+ year kind of a journey to create a space. But I want to have a space that not only works for somebody at Liz's point in a career, but works for the young people who are trying to figure out, where can I gather? Is there a place where I can park my car during a flood when it's got 10 inches of mud in it so that it doesn't just get towed? Is there a place where we can do culturally specific cooking classes? Is there a space where we can actually have our communities of practice come together? Is there a space where I can host a meeting for 100 people, donors or something, who want to be doing work with us? What we most end up doing is having to either rent or borrow space. And we don't have a collective space that you can use, we can use. So we're trying to imagine, what would that look like? You all have given us a lot of information. We're going to be asking you for more today. And out of this, when we get to the end of the day, we're hoping that you have given us more to think about than what you've given us to think about throughout. But we are just so grateful. Milenko Matanovich, who many of you know, if you don't, you will by the end of today, has agreed to walk us through this exercise. But Milenko will tell you that This is the largest group that he's ever tried to do this exercise with. And so you're going to be in small groups, medium-sized groups, large group discussions before we all come back together and see what this is about. And I'm closing on this picture, and Teresa said this a bit. For me, it's about how do we get from talking about me and you to talking about we and us. Our community is much more diverse than we recognize that it is. And if any of you have gone to any of the iterations of the film festival, I'm going to encourage you to do that. It's going to give you an expanded view of who is in the community in the North Sound region. It's even more than us in this room. But you all are a conduit to the community, and it's just going to be incredibly important. So with that, do you all ever go to Goodwill? I'm the person you don't want to take to Goodwill because I can only see the table in front of me, and if somebody says there's something over there, I can't see it. So Matt Main is somewhere in this room. Where is Matt? Come on up. It's terrible. So Matt's going to talk through just some of the ways that we've captured information. I just can't thank you all enough. I know you're going to see me again, but thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'll get to that in a minute. But just, want to thank Liz for kind of walking us through the last couple years, where we've been as a network, kind of what we've done. I'm going to talk a little bit this morning, just for a couple minutes, about some of the data that we've collected over the last couple years, just to kind of show us where we're at kind of currently. So what we have on this slide here is kind of the first public showing, I guess, of the some of the results of our North Sound Wellbeing Survey that just wrapped up in April. I think probably big shout out to all the folks in the Measuring Wellbeing Community of Practice who helped us roll that out over the last year and a half. I don't want to harsh the vibe too much, but we're over half of the folks who responded to that survey. We had a pretty good, statistically significant number. Over half the folks in the region are either suffering or struggling. And, I think we can look around at everything that's happening today, everything that's been happening over the last couple months, and that probably feels right? We have issues around folks feeling safe. It's harder to afford stuff. We've got our work cut out for us. So I just want to start with that, and then I'm gonna raise us back up here. One of the other things we asked in that survey was for folks to tell us in open response, in their own words, what contributed to their community's well-being. And what I did after we got all those responses is just go through with the vital conditions for well-being as our framework, and just said, okay, this person said access to healthcare, so that's going in. Basic needs for health and safety. So we use that as a framework to kind of sort through all those responses. And I think this is pretty astonishing. Just over 80% of the responses that came in there, so 80% of the folks that responded, said something around belonging, and civic muscle was one of the things that contributed to their community's well-being. We had a lot of other stuff that popped in there, financial stability, access to healthcare, a healthy environment, all that. But a vast majority, it was about things like community values, belonging, togetherness, acceptance, social support. So we're talking about, being able to lean on friends and family or faith communities, and then the social safety net as kind of that civic muscle piece. So really strong institutions that are helping catch people so we don't fall too far, right? These are the things that that create, more than all these other things, a healthy community. I have a hard time describing it. It's like these kind of invisible, intangible things where you just, if they're there, you know it. and if they're not there, you can feel they're missing. These are some of the things that are really important for creating a community that's thriving. Which leads us to a little bit of the Collaborative Action Network. So in late 2024, I know a lot of folks in this room probably did this survey. It was a big one. We completed a social network analysis of the Collaborative Action Network. At that point, there were 188 organizations in the network. And this is kind of the network map that came from that. The bigger dots are folks that are more connected. The smaller dots are folks that are less connected. And you can see, kind of from center out how that works. But this is color-coded by county that organizations are working in. So this middle area, the gray, these are folks that are working in multiple counties. That big orange area up in the top left is Whatcom County. Skagit down on the bottom in the green, Snohomish in the light blue, and then kind of scattered throughout Island and San Juan folks. But this is what we see when we kind of map out how the network is actually connected. We see lots of folks who are geographically connected, working a lot more closely. They're more connected. We can see that just by the colors that are kind of bubbling out there by themselves. And we see this through line of folks that work in multiple counties. So that tells us a couple things. That tells us, geography is a pretty deciding factor for how folks are connecting. But if we go to our next slide, taking out the folks that, let me start here. So we also asked in that network analysis, who is the ACH connected you with? Like, who are you collaborating with because of the North Sound ACH that's in the network? So those are the folks that are in purple here. I'll flash back and forth real quick. Right, so you can see just over half of the folks in the network are collaborating, not just, networking or chatting every once in a while. We're talking about collaboration, with a pretty specific definition there. Over the half of the folks in the network, we have helped facilitate some sort of collaboration. And I think the big numbers there is that 54% of those connections were between counties, so we're bridging geography. And then I think the bigger number for me is that 85% of those 85% of those connections are cross sectors. So we're not just talking about bridging geography, we're talking about bridging between regional health systems and government and small grassroots nonprofits and anybody and everybody. Look around, it's a pretty diverse group of folks who are in this room that do a lot of different things. So when we're talking about a small C community campus here, as we kind of move through the day, I want you all to just kind of keep that in mind, kind of the work that has been done, the work that you all have been doing over the last couple of years with this network. And how do we continue to do that? How do we iterate on that? How do we, kind of do that in a different way while also acknowledging we have challenges today. Can we set ourselves up to be in a strong position to also handle the challenges of tomorrow? Because, we will get through today. There's a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. My last slide here is just a word cloud where we had 100 of the partner organizations in the network responded to this question, just asking what has become possible for your organization since joining the network. And this is what you told us. So, a lot about creating a community, finding support, innovating, and finding new ways to provide services and take care of the folks you're taking care of. So yeah, that's where I kind of want to leave us. Is we've looked back at what we've accomplished over the last few years, all of us together, and then just kind of starting to look ahead at what we might be able to create next. And I'm going to call up Malenko here. If you were here in January, we kind of dipped our toes into this idea of a community campus with the small C with Malenko. But I'll go ahead and invite him up. He's been doing this sort of facilitation for over 35 years. with that, I'll bring up Malenko. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Can you hear me? I'm delighted to be here. A possible community campus is this imaginary place. There's a school district in Italy called Reggio Emilia that believes that schools themselves, the architecture and art, is a teacher. And stretching that concept for community campus, how can it shape the qualities that Liz was talking about? How can it reflect the aspirations you have in a physical space? To help us think into that a little bit, so Liz talked about how this arose from ACH history. Matt talked about the context of region and what matters to all of you. As you think about this possible campus, community campus, that was the key word, community. I would also like you to think about some larger issues. I call it land use. What is happening in our landscapes, our urban landscapes? I took this picture from the airplane flying into SeaTac. It's from it's the lower King County. It's an image to me of dysfunction. This physical space does not encourage community. Everybody lives apart from each other. You need cars to get anywhere. There's no centers. There's no metaphors for how we are united. Unless we pay attention to these things, everything will look just like this. It doesn't need to. As an artist, I believe in this statement that our soul, which is a shortcut to say all the things that matter to us, that empower us, that make us better, if that soul is uncared for, it turns into an angry child. And when you think about our physical environment, how much anger there is. Yesterday, when I was driving up here, I had a small incident of that anger. My driving style is that I leave a little bit of space between me and the car in front of me, and somebody jumped into that space. And I said, that's fine. We continue with the traffic. We do not need to put on the brakes. But the person behind me started to honk at me. How could you let this person in? It stops me. Like, this person was thinking as a driver, and I was thinking as a traffic, that there is a larger idea here. I'm a part of a traffic. And if I leave a little bit of space, other people can move faster. We can move faster together. But the anger of this person was, no, you're disempowering me. You're stopping me. You let somebody else win. And imagine how many moments like that penetrate into our lives all the time. So that anger is all over the place. Now, I think there are some answers to think about. We know that sprawl, continuous sprawl, is not healthy for us, and it's not good for nature. A nonprofit in California estimates that if everyone on the planet lives by the standards of how we got accustomed to live in our neighborhoods, We would need 5 Earth systems to support us. It's not good economy. It's not very promising. We have loneliness epidemic because when we live in separate houses, we lose the daily reminders that we're connected. And we know now that infrastructure costs for low density neighborhoods is higher, more for telephone lines, more for sewage, more for roads than it is in density. So something to think about. The punchline here is, where is this possible community campus located is as important as what it is. Some examples that we may learn from, how public spaces and buildings can relate to each other, how art can be integrated into a building. Children's Clinic, Odessa Brown Clinic in Seattle is a good example of that. How Cedar Hats in Swinomish were incorporated, the cultural treasures were incorporated into a design. All those possibilities promise something for how we can move into the future. This was taken in Germany, how some countries learned how to keep the edges of their neighborhoods clean and not sprawl into nature. And here is finally an example from Tempe, Arizona, where they're creating a car-free neighborhood. So all the people who live in this neighborhood live without cars because transit allows them to get places. So there are some good examples to think about how to position this campus in a society. The question will be to solicit your ideas and get them out into the open. Thanks.
You